The Lord Mayor. City of Adelaide Council meeting on Tuesday, 11 March 2025. The Lord Mayor is in the chair. This council meeting will be streamed live and recorded for publishing to the internet. Please note that an audio and visual recording is being taken of this meeting. This means that your presence at and any contribution you make to the meeting may be collected, used, disclosed or published publicly by the Council, including transferring outside Australia.
Good evening. Council acknowledges that we're meeting on the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains and pays respects to elders past and present. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land, and we acknowledge that they are of continuing people living today. We also extend that respect to other Aboriginal language groups and other First Nations people who are with us. The Council acknowledges the vision of Colonel William Ite in determining the site for Adelaide and the design of the city of Adelaide with its 6 squares and surrounding belt of continuous parklands, which is recognised on the National Heritage List as one of the greatest examples of Australia's planning heritage. We pray for wisdom, courage, empathy, understanding and guidance in the decisions that we make, while seeking and respecting the opinions of others. May we in this meeting speak honestly, listen attentively, think clearly, and decide wisely for the good governance of the City of Adelaide and the well-being of those we serve. Now I ask all those present who are able to stand in silence in memory of those who gave their lives in defence of their country at sea, on land and in the air. We have apologies and leave of absence for Councillor Abrahimzadeh and Councillor Lee. And could I ask that someone move confirmation of the minutes? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Snape. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. Thank you, members. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? If not, we'll move on. This evening we have one deputation, and I welcome the Right Honourable, the former Lord Mayor, Martin Hazy, to come and address us. Thank you. I'm very pleased to see you. It's a great honour to see you coming back to speak to us. Thank you. I think you know the ropes.
Thank you indeed, Lord Mayor, and thank you for granting this deputation. My Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor and councillors, thank you to yourselves and to Councillor Martin for taking an active interest in this matter. I speak this evening in my capacity as Honorary Chair of the Clippership City of Adelaide Board, a pro bono role that I enthusiastically took on in late 2024. In fact, it was this very council chamber that first generated my own interest in the plight of the Clippership and its long association with the City of Adelaide. After meeting the former chair, the late Cray O'Connor AM, and the Clippership directors in 2015, the council unanimously endorsed a motion to fund the recreation of a City of Adelaide coat of arms for the stern of the Clippership. And since then, I've been an active supporter of the board's long-term vision to create a maritime village at Dock 2 at Port Adelaide. Although I will mostly speak to the exciting future of the Clippership this evening, I will briefly touch upon its past because it is indeed important. City of Adelaide was purpose-built in the UK in 1864 to bring immigrants and cargo to Adelaide and to enable the export of goods from South Australia back to the UK. It has proudly carried the City of Adelaide's coat of arms on its stern all of those years. The City of Adelaide undertook some 23 return journeys between the years of 1864 and 1887, and it is estimated that some 250,000 Australians can be linked to passengers or crew of this vessel, many of whom have played a significant role in our state. As the oldest surviving composite clipper ship in the world today, the clipper ship has a remarkable link to the City of Adelaide, the city after which it was named. And a composite clipper ship refers to a vessel that has an iron hull wrapped with wooden planks. There are only 3 composite clipper ships in existence today, and the City of Adelaide is 5 years older than its most famous cousin, the Cutty Sark, another composite clipper ship which was built in 1869. And bringing the clipper ship City of Adelaide from Scotland to Port Adelaide was no small endeavour. And I salute the determination of the directors who have contributed countless hours on a pro bono basis for some 15 to 20 years. The clipper ship's board of directors are qualified maritime and engineering professionals who each have an enduring passion for the preservation of this unique vessel and also for South Australia. The long association between the clipper ship and this council runs deep, and I quote from the City of Adelaide Council's own website. The City of Adelaide shares its name with the world's oldest surviving clipper ship. In 2014, the clipper ship City of Adelaide arrived in South Australia for the first time in 125 years after a decade-long campaign to preserve the ship. The ship now has a permanent home at Dock 2 at Port Adelaide. And while the history of the clipper ship is interesting indeed, the future is more compelling, as the clipper ship embodies the qualities that have come to define all South Australians: migration, determination, creativity, export, trade, resilience, and an outward-looking disposition are as important today as they were way back then. Our long-term vision is to create a maritime village at Dock 2 at Port Adelaide, a destination that becomes a major tourism drawcard for our city and for our state. As we look to South Australia's upcoming bicentenary in 2036, we want for the clipper ship City of Adelaide to play a key role in celebrating everything that is wonderful about this state. The Board of Directors are undertaking repair and maintenance work in 2025 in an area on the ship, at the rear of the ship, known as the poop deck, the area adjoining the stern, adjacent to where the City of Adelaide coat of arms is already displayed. This proposal seeks to complete the structural and decorative work around the coat of arms on the stern of the vessel, including the carving of the name City of Adelaide. Forming part of the City of Adelaide's 2025-2026 financial year budget, I respectfully request for the Council to allocate the sum of $30,000 towards further works on the historic 1864 clipper ship City of Adelaide. Members, I understand the realities of budget pressures, but I do encourage you to look at this with all seriousness. I would, Lord Mayor. That would be greatly appreciated. Members, I will speak to you very briefly in conclusion about the significance of this project to the City of Adelaide and to South Australia. We are 10 short years away from celebrating 2036, which is the bicentenary of this state, and we need a beacon on which that to happen. We believe that Dock 2 at Port Adelaide will be playing a significant role in the celebrations of the state's bicentenary. This contribution, should you vote to support it, will play a small but vitally important role in ensuring that we catalyse considerable further activity in the building of a maritime village over the next 10 years, which will be completed by 2036 in order to celebrate everything that's wonderful about this state. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I just wonder if you might like to stay with us, because I'm going to seek leave of the meeting to bring forward some items. I just want the indulgence of members for some brief housekeeping. It seems to me that I could bring forward 3 items to assist in the orderly management of the agenda. Firstly, this item relating to the motion on notice 20.3, out of courtesy to the former Lord Mayor. Then my usual update, the LM's documents, which will be unusual because it will be my usual update of activities, but also some comments to assist members to understand the impact of the recent judgment. And thirdly, to bring forward 17.1 into a position after 13 on the agenda to facilitate all the matters related to the CEO in one discussion point. So moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Snape. All those in favour? Those against? Thank you, members. Thank you for indulging me in just moving those things around. We'll just move the note past the petitions, and we'll take item 20.3 and ask Councillor Martin if you'd like to move your motion as printed.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Lord Mayor, for bringing this forward. And I have to confess that I was a member of the council which approved the funding for the coat of arms, which now has been attached to the City of Adelaide Clipper, and of which we hold a copy in the City Archive. And that proposal was important, Lord Mayor, because it made that connection between the City of Adelaide and the Clipper, the City of Adelaide. And this decision that members are being asked to consider tonight is no less important. As we've heard, the Clipper is now on permanent display, and while it is on display, it represents not only a significant piece of maritime history, but of course the link with the City of Adelaide. As you probably saw from the note that's attached to the agenda, the history of the ship is so closely linked with so many anecdotes, and the one which appeals to me is, of course, the one about the maiden voyage, which carried limes for a pharmacist in the City of Adelaide who was making this cordial that seemed to have beneficial health influences. And that pharmacist, Anne Bickford, went on to found Bickford Cordials. It was just an extraordinary thing that happened with the maiden voyage of the ship. So the connection is strong, and it will grow stronger. As the former Lord Mayor Martin Haese explained, it is likely that the Clipper, in the centre of a maritime village, will become the focus, or one of the focuses, for the centenary of South Australia, which is coming up in a decade. In a decade. Now, Lord Mayor, I concede these are constrained times. We've just been in a meeting talking about the need to sharpen the pencil, and I don't dispute that for a moment. But these constrained times as they are don't prevent us from making decisions about the future of the City of Adelaide and our participation in the centenary in 2036. In fact, our history, I think, transcends not only our current financial circumstances, but presents us with a responsibility, and this is one such responsibility, that is to ensure that the vessel is in good shape, but somewhat selfishly bears the name City of Adelaide on the poop deck, which is located on the stern of the ship. I would ask that members consider this important link with the history of the City of Adelaide and the potential for the ship to play a substantial part in 2036 in the celebrations of the centenary.
Councillor Noon?
All I would say is I can concur with Mr Haese and Councillor Martin, and I think the past informs the future, and therefore we really need to protect the past. So I totally support this.
The contrary view, Councillor Davis.
Yeah. Given the discussion we've just had regarding our finances, I think it couldn't have come at a worse time, given the absolute state of disrepair of the City Adelaide budget. It makes it difficult to commit to another $30,000 of expenditure when we are in such financial trouble. So I find it difficult to vote for this motion, given the ESCOSA report and the discussion we've just had.
I think it's just consideration. Councillor Siebentreut?
Well, Lord Mayor, that was to be my point, is the motion refers consideration of a budget allocation. So this is the absolute right time to be considering this. We have proposals in front of us. There are various strategic projects that are coming forward, and it's right to bring this forward. So I'll be happy to support it for consideration, noting that there are various other initiatives we also need to look at investing in.
The contrary views. Would you like to sum up, Councillor? Summed up. All those in favour of the motion as printed? All those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. I would just bring forward my Lord Mayor's report, and the initial comments I'd like to make relate to Live Golf. Following the decision by Council directing the CEO and I to enter into negotiations, we've both had multiple meetings with the course designers and the state government. That's largely been involved in information sharing, making sure they had all the data and information required to shape the course and understand where there are areas that are sensitive. That relocation was also discussed fairly in a heated way, I'd say, at the North Adelaide Society AGM, where there were about 100 residents. I also met the Metropolitan mayors this week, and we discussed changes to the Local Government Act. We discussed a whole range of issues that affected all of us, and that should help inform the upcoming AGMs and ALGA general meeting. Like many of you, I've been in festivals and fringe events, or WOMAD, and like many of you, I've been at Writers' Week. And this year, Writers' Week, as always, involved the Pioneer Women's Memorial Garden, and it was the first time I've had the opportunity to be in an event inside the garden where the verge was fenced to stop people walking on the planting, and that was a great advantage because it means the site doesn't have to be replanted after each Writers' Week festival. The other events that have happened, of course, have been mainly music with WOMAD, but I did attend an extraordinary event, as did Councillor Giles, at the University of Adelaide. It was a Ghana Day, and there was a launch of a Ghana songbook that was first produced in the 1990s under the auspices of CASM, the Centre for Aboriginal Study of Music. That organisation carries on now and has had some extraordinary successes. But in particular, this book contained text in language and in English, as well as music, and it was a beautifully produced product, and it was the recipient of a sponsorship grant from the City of Adelaide. So I was very proud to represent you at that event. That's the comments about my activities, but I now want to move on to the matter of the judgment of the Court of Disputed Returns. Clearly there have been commentators and pundits who've expressed their own views and opinions, so I've asked the CEO to give us some clear information and articulate the facts to assist both the elected members and the community. So over to you, Mr. Sedgwick.
Thank you, and through you, presiding member. On Friday the 7th of March, the Court of Disputed Returns delivered judgment in the matter of Hyde, Exer and Lee. That matter concerned a petition filed in the court by Mr Alexander Hyde contesting the validity of the 2022 periodic election, which resulted in the election of 4 councillors to represent Council's Central Ward. In upholding the petition in part, the court found that the election was affected by illegal practices and that those illegal practices affected the outcome of the election. At the request of counsel for Mr Hyde, the court has adjourned the matter to 4 April 2025 to allow time for the parties to make submissions regarding what orders the court should make as a result of its judgment. As the court has not yet made any orders, each of the Central Ward councillors continue to hold office as members of council in accordance with the terms of the Local Government Act. Those councillors are entitled to attend council meetings, council committee meetings and information and briefing sessions in the ordinary way unless and until the court orders otherwise. Importantly, Section 40 of the Local Government Act makes it clear that there is no risk to the validity or lawfulness of any of the decisions of council since the 2022 periodic elections arising from the findings of the court, including at tonight's meeting. Any council decision made prior to the court's orders taking effect will remain valid even after the court makes orders finalising the proceedings.
Thank you. I don't know if there are any questions following that report. Councillor Davis, could I just seek clarification? I know that you acted in this matter, and I'm not a lawyer, and I'm just asking you if you could reflect on whether you have a conflict of interest, because I know you did declare at one stage that you should not be involved in any proceedings in the council.
If I have a conflict, I think you have a conflict, Lord Mayor. And I believe this is a question, is it not?
And you believe you haven't got a conflict?
Well, there's no matter before the council chamber.
I'm just saying that previously I understand...
But there's no motion, there's no outcome.
Can you just let me finish? I understand previously you have said that you did not want to be involved in any matters discussing these proceedings. So I'm just checking.
Well, we are... The way that the Local Government Act works in terms of conflicts of interest is regarding a matter to be decided by the council, a member must determine if they have a conflict of interest. There's no matter to be determined by this matter, is there?
Councillor, I'm just giving you the chance to repeat what you've said before if you wanted to, but if you don't, that's fine.
Well, there's no matter to be decided, simply an opportunity to ask questions.
I'm giving you a fair chance, Councillor, to make a decision. It's your decision, not mine.
Well, it's under the Local Government Act that it's only for a matter that comes before council.
I'm only reflecting the message you sent to the previous CEO, but if you don't regard that as a problem, please carry on.
I don't know, I just follow the Local Government Act. But I'll carry on regardless. In terms of, my view is that the council should go into caretaker mode at the results, if the result comes back to vacate the Central Ward councillors, and I'd be seeking a motion or a special meeting for the council to deal that way. The CEO has also spoke about the legality of it, but my question is around of the administration. What about the moral implications of the council charging forward and making decisions when there's potentially 4 elected members here who weren't democratically elected?
So I think you're invoking 91A, are you?
No. So there, one question and perhaps a matter of clarity. The continuance of the Central Ward councillors and the impact on the decisions of the council is clearly articulated under Section 40 of the Local Government Act, which essentially provides that no act or proceeding of a council is invalid by reason of a defect in the election or appointment of a member. So the subsections of that provision of the Local Government Act are very clear. The legitimacy of decisions made up until this point and until such time as orders are made is clearly protected.
And can I just add one other matter? The provisions of the caretaker part of the legislation applies to general.
I can address that. So the caretaker provisions and Council's caretaker policy only operate with respect to general elections, not supplementary elections. The Act is quite clear in that regard. So caretaker policy is not a concept that is relevant to supplementary elections.
But isn't it true that the council could impose its own policy in terms of the nature and decisions that it makes to ensure that our community has confidence that we have a democratically elected chamber, and we could, as a council, decide that we would only deal with legislatively whilst a by-election is occurring?
Through the presiding member, it's always available to council to limit what it does.
Can we get an undertaking for what the CEO has informed us? Can we get that sent out as perhaps an e-brief so that members have it to read and to refer to should the subject come up in the future, especially around the what provisions of a local government act, etc., etc. That'd be very handy, I think. Thank you.
Through the presiding member, if you would seek to have my verbal statement incorporated in the minutes, you could move that way.
So should we just get to the end of the questions first? Councillor?
In the matter concerning Councillor Lee, how much has council expended in attending hearings and the trial and the evidence? Because my understanding is we've been sending lawyers along. How much have we spent total?
I don't think we can answer that as a question without notice. We'll have to take that on notice.
Do we have any approximate idea of how much money we've spent?
I can't answer that. We'll have to take it on notice.
Okay.
So if there are no other questions... Precisely, but I'm just waiting to make sure there are no other questions before we move. So I would be grateful if someone could move noting of my report as part 1, noting the advice, the legal advice, and also incorporation. The statement, sorry. Noting the statement. Can we just make this up on the run? So firstly, noting the Lord Mayor's report. Secondly, noting the statement made by Mr Sedgman, and thirdly, incorporating the statement in the report. In the minutes, I apologise. It's always difficult on the run. Whoops. And that's moved by, I think Councillor Martin moved it. Can I ask if it's seconded? Councillor Siebentrit, seconded. Add a 1. I'm sorry, would you like, we've just... I think that the CEO will assist us to make this credible.
Through you, presiding member, notes the verbal statement. No, 2, in 2. The verbal statement that the CEO provided to council in relation to the Court of Disputed Returns judgment delivered 7 March 2025.
And could we take the verb out in part 3? I think we've made a landing on that. Is that okay? Everyone's happy with that?
A question and potentially an amendment. Will the council be making submissions to the court, and what will those submissions be if they are intended?
It hasn't been resolved, I think, yet. Thank you.
Because my suggestion would be that, and perhaps this is a conversation for another time, perhaps not an amendment now, but that we make submissions that the entirety of Central Ward be vacated and that a new election is held and the council can maintain that way.
I think it would be unwise to make this up on the run, and we should take legal advice before we make this decision.
And we could, move that submission.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So all those in favour as on the screen? All those against? That's carried. Thank you, members. Thank you very much indeed. We'll move on to the next item, which is the Audit and Risk Committee. Some of these items have already been discussed by us, the business plan and budget. I was going to run through after and put the item regarding the CEO between 13 and 14, because 13 is, we're almost there. I apologise for the disorderly manner in which we're progressing through this. Could I ask Councillor Stephen-Tritt if you'd like to move those two on block?
Happy to move them, Lord Mayor.
And seconded by Councillor Giles. Any debate on that? If not, all those in favour? All those against? That's carried unanimously. Councillor Couros, I do believe you didn't vote. Can we take it again? All those in favour? All those against? They were the recommendations of another committee. A division has been called. All those in favour?
Please stand. A division has been called in relation to item 12. Please stand in favour of the motion until your name has been called. Councillor Noon, Deputy Lord Mayor, Councillor Elliott, Councillor Ho, Councillor Giles, Councillor Stephen-Tritt, Councillor Snape and Councillor Martin.
Thank you.
Lord Mayor.
Thank you, members. That was carried. We're now moving on to item 12, which is advice of Caterpillar, our subsidiary, and it's just advice, moved by Councillor Noon, seconded by Councillor Elliott. Can we take these on block as well? All those in favour? All those against? Yes, thank you, that's carried. We'll now move on to 13. And I think the CEO will declare a conflict to this one. And can I ask somebody to join us on the dais?
Yes, through the presiding member, the matters of the recommendations of the CEO Performance Panel, I declare a material conflict in relation to those matters, and I'll leave the chamber while the council deliberates. Mr McCready, can you take the chair?
Thank you very much. Councillor Noon was there. Would you like to move it? Seconded by, do I have a seconder? Councillor Martin. Any debate on that or any comments, Councillor Noon? No?
Only to say that I just believe that this CEO role in the City of Adelaide is very different to other CEO roles in the state. And it comes with so many more challenges, unique challenges that sets it apart from other local government areas in South Australia. Yet the remuneration for this critical leadership role sits below the market rate for an organisation.
Councillor, can I just suggest we're actually doing the recommendation of the performance review panel first? That's
oh,
item
okay.
13.
We're not talking about the.
Yes.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Can we deal with this
yeah,
first?
Yeah. No. All good.
So, if we're happy with the recommendation and there's no contrary view, can I put that to the vote? All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. Thank you, members. I'm sorry. Would you like to move the next one, which is 17.1?
Apologies, Lord Mayor. Yes, I do. Any second?
17.1 is the item that you are addressing, you started to address. So you're going to move the Remuneration Tribunal, which is an anomalous observation on their part. Can I just ask for a seconder? Councillor Stephen-Tritt. Councillor Noon, please.
Yeah, sorry about that.
It's because there's a conflict of interest and we moved to move it forward. Thank you. Councillor.
I'll just pick up where I left. As the capital city Adelaide faces unique challenges that set it apart from other local government areas in South Australia, yet the remuneration for this critical leadership role sits below the market rate for an organisation of this calibre and complexity, and that was really identified when we actually went through the selection process. A capital city council is also known to be more challenging due to the nature of its elected members, who are often more politically driven, leading to a highly dynamic and sometimes contentious decision-making environment, which changes the culture of the entire sort of leadership. So there are several other reasons why the role of the City of Adelaide CEO should be classified differently. Economic and strategic leadership. The CEO is responsible for driving the city's economic growth, tourism and business development, broader stakeholder management. Unlike any other councils, the City of Adelaide must engage with state and federal governments, major corporate and institutional stakeholders, etc. Capital city responsibility. The CEO oversees services and projects that impact not just local residents and ratepayers, but the entire state. And of course, the political complex governance. City of Adelaide operates in more politically charged, as I mentioned before. Given these factors, the remuneration of the City of Adelaide CEO should be reviewed to align with the responsibilities and expectations of a capital city leader, ensuring the organisation remains well positioned to meet the challenges and opportunities ahead. So I strongly believe that we are different to other councils. We should not be compared, and that it puts us in a unique situation. And as we're going through this particular response to this remuneration tribunal report, I think we need to really strongly make that point. Thank you.
I disagree with many of the comments that were made, and I don't think that our opposition to an independent panel talking about payment of our CEO and making those recommendations will be well received by our ratepayers when we're in the situation that we are, particularly just failing the SCOSA report, and there's serious concerns around the Zis Council's financial
Point of
viability.
order, Lord Mayor. The City of Adelaide didn't fail anything in
my view,
the SCOSA report.
In my view, it failed the SCOSA report resoundingly. And if there's an opportunity...
Lord Mayor, there is an obligation on members to tell the truth in speaking to the chamber.
I understand
Section
this is a tactic to continually interrupt me.
Here, Councillor.
Yeah. I don't think that this passes the pub test in these circumstances. When you have a look at the CEO of the City of Brisbane, for example, they manage the entirety of Brisbane. It's a huge council with full-time councillors. If you look at Sydney, Melbourne, their budgets are astronomical. Our council is quite small. It's very small and less politically charged than many councils in Melbourne where their CEOs are getting paid less than ours. I accept the recommendations of the Remuneration Tribunal and I believe that we should implement them, and I don't think we should be trying to get around that, particularly when we've just come out of our budget considerations. This would have a serious impact for the long-term impact on our ratepayers. So I think we should be doing everything we can to sharpen the pencil, as you put it, Lord Mayor. So I don't agree with this motion at all.
Thank you. Councillor Stephen-Trud.
Lord Mayor, for those of us who've been in and around business for a while, one will know that you need to be able to pay the right amount of money to attract the top talent and the right talent. I think that's generally accepted, and that's exactly what we're looking at here. We want to ensure that moving into the future we continue to attract the right type, the top type of talent to be leading this organisation. There will always be its challenges, whether they're financial, whether they're managing stakeholder needs, and it's really important that we send the right message whenever we are out in the market looking at filling a position like this, that we are looking for some of the leaders, the best CEOs in the country in the local government sector. And I think critical to doing that is ensuring that the remuneration is appropriate and on the correct path. So I'm fully supportive of the motion.
The comments, Councillor Couros and then Councillor Martin.
Councillor Martin. Look, thank you, Lord Mayor, and I will speak only briefly. I agree entirely with Councillor Stephen-Trud's arguments, but furthermore, there's a practical dimension to this, and for those who've read the papers, it seems an extraordinary thing that a city that wishes to retain or even attract a talented CEO to this position in the future is facing the possibility of offering a salary range that is lower than the City of Hobart, lower than the City of Geelong, lower than the City of Mackay, regional Mackay. It beggars belief that it could be argued that this is an unreasonable salary range proposed within the documentation. I urge members to support this. This is not a decision about today. It is a decision about the future of the City of Adelaide, and I recommend highly that you support this
point
motion.
of order, Lord Mayor. I think it's, as Councillor Martin says, you have to... equating the City of Adelaide, where it has the size of its residents, 26,000, to Geelong, which has 10 times the amount of residents, I don't think is speaking the truth.
I don't think that's the point of order. If I could just ask you to carry on, Councillor Martin.
Mayor, I have finished.
Thank you.
I had finished anyway.
Thank you. Councillor Kouros.
I think some really valid points were being made, and the most valid point is that we are a relatively small council. And I think that we have to look at our budget overall, and we can't afford to pay anything more than what we actually are paying now. In actual fact, we can't even afford what we are paying at the moment. So, you know, and if we're going to keep increasing the rates just to make sure that we can incorporate paying for a CEO because we want to attract better people, then we're going about this the wrong way. I think that we've got to look really hard at this. Does it pass the pub test? No, it does not. This is quite a substantial amount of money that the CEO actually is receiving. And yes, it is a multifaceted job. It's he has got to deal with councillors, got to deal with running an organisation, and it's got to deal with staff, and it's got to deal with budgets, and that's no different than any other CEO. It's just that it's out in the public. That's all. So I really think you really need to really think carefully about where you go with this, because our ratepayers at the moment are suffering. They are having a complete difficult time out there with their businesses, which 80% of our rates do come from our businesses, as we substantiated. And then we're going to turn around and say to those people that are having a hard time out there that we're just going to go and pay more for a CEO. And then we're going to increase your rates to do that. I don't think this is the time to be having those discussions. I don't think this is the time to be telling our public that we're going to be paying more for a CEO.
Thank you. I think the DLM wishes to speak. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to provide some perspective and point out that whilst the assertion has been made we can't afford currently what we're paying for our CEO or remunerating our CEO, but we are actually delivering a budget surplus, so I think that demonstrates that we are able to afford the talent that we've been able to attract. Perspective-wise, the University of Adelaide is not yet the Adelaide University. The VC earns in the order of over $1 million on the basis that they have a complex role, they have a complex organisation, they're responsible for a small city of about 30,000 staff and students. However, their entire land holding, if you want to call it that, would fit entirely within the City of Adelaide, but they also don't pay any rates for the land they do have within the City of Adelaide. So we've got someone who's being paid to run a small city within a small city in the order of 5 times more than what we're paying our CEO to pay. By comparison, the City of Adelaide has about 25,000 residents and about 12,000 businesses, which equates to, again, about 30,000. So we're not even really comparing apples to apples when we compare someone who's or someone who needs to be a very highly qualified public servant managing a very complex organisation over a much larger area, and yet we have someone who's also a public servant in a much smaller area on non-rateable land being paid 5 times more. I think there is a degree of fairness that comes into this to make sure that a city, a capital city, the economic centre of our state, is attracting someone that can handle the task. I absolutely reject any sort of claim from this chamber that we should be seeking to pay that person less when they have to put up with the amount of crap that they do that comes out of this room. And if that does offend anyone, I'm happy to withdraw that particular word and replace it with something a little bit more. Well, I'll say the amount of rubbish that we have to deal with coming from this room. I did apologise and I withdrew it. And I said that I'd preemptively offer that apology, and I have done. Anyway, I wanted to provide that perspective, Lord Mayor, because this is an incredibly important task. It's one that we can afford to pay for, and we have people within our city managing similarly complex tasks on a much greater budget with a similar scope of responsibility.
Out of interest for the Deputy Lord Mayor, what he just said, is was he comparing the university with the City of Adelaide, is that right? The running of the university?
I'm happy to provide a personal explanation, Lord Mayor. If the council listened to anything I said, that was exactly the point I made at the beginning and end of my comments.
So is the university government run or is it privately run?
That's an interesting observation. There is an Act, the City of Adelaide Act, so it's almost like a giant statutory authority. Most of its income comes from the federal government. I don't know what you mean by public or...
I'm just wondering, Lord Mayor.
I can refer you to a report I wrote for Julia Gillard on the funding of universities if you'd like to have more detail. Davis?
I have a question. There's a lot of bagging of the Remuneration Tribunal. In the report, did they consider the City of Adelaide Council and its position, the number of staff that it had? Or did they just pick this out of nowhere and they're just incompetent?
Those elements, but there seems to have been a desire to rationalise some of the bans, and there's a significant degree of unrest in the local government sector because several councils have had the maximum level of their remuneration packages reduced below the level that they are now. So that the disquiet is that there are CEOs who've been appointed, and when their reappointment time comes up, they would technically have to take $50,000 or $80,000 cuts in salary. So there are anomalies across the sector, and we would not be alone in complaining about the way this is operating.
So is it true to say then that the sector would be universally affected in South Australia, and if we do this together, then there's all these arguments around attracting quality is a moot point?
Those elements are true, and it's true that the directors and executives in other capital cities earn more than the CEO here. But the reality is there is a challenge across local government, and the Local Government Association is also making submissions pointing out the anomalies and trying to balance the disparate views. But everybody recognises that a capital city is different from other suburban councils. Further comments? If not, would you like to sum up?
Yeah, I'll just say, look, it costs us a lot of money to find the right CEO, and we need to do everything right to retain. The culture of an organisation starts at the top, and the top is not the CEO, the top is the council in this case. And this makes our CEO's role extra challenging. We, quite frankly, couldn't pay him enough to keep him, and he's doing a damn good job.
I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. I think we'll check. Division's been called.
Members, a division has been called in relation to item 17.1. Please stand in favour of the motion until your name has been called. Councillor Noon, Deputy Lord Mayor, Councillor Elliott, Councillor Giles, Councillor Siebentrip and Councillor Martin.
That was carried. Thank you, members. We'll move on to... oh yes, we might get the CEO back. Sorry. Perhaps we could move on now to item 14. Councillor Giles, this is your committee. Or is it still your committee?
It is. Well, it's a good question. I think it isn't anymore, and I also was not present at this meeting.
Okay, Councillor Snape, sorry, would you like to move this en bloc?
May I ask that recommendation 3 is treated separately?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear.
May I ask, Lord Mayor, if recommendation 3 is treated separately?
Okay, so shall we move 1 and 2 together? Seconded by Councillor Elliott. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. We'll move on to item 3.
Lord Mayor, I'm happy to move this, but I raised this matter at committee, and I wonder if I might raise it with the administration.
Can I just get a seconder, Councillor Snape, and now your question or query?
I note, as indeed last week, that this lease is granted for 21 years. And the length of the lease is primarily because the club is spending about $1 million on its own clubhouse, which of course council's contributing $3 million to. The lease doesn't say anything about the completion of the structure, and I'm wondering whether the administration might consider including or incorporating in the lease an expectation of a completion of the structure to the satisfaction of the administration. And I'm wondering whether that requires me to move an amendment or whether that's something that the administration might undertake.
Could I have some advice, please?
Through the presiding member, if an undertaking to pursue that through the finalisation of the lease and the very important project management agreement that supports it, we'd be happy to do that.
Thank you. I'm happy with that, Lord Mayor.
So we're happy to have an undertaking, not an amendment, Mr. Sedgman. Okay. With that comment, all those in favour? All those against? That's carried. Thank you, members. We'll now move on to 15. City Planning, Councillor Noon.
Lord Mayor,
there's a conflict as well. I should note, I think it's 7.3 and 7.4. Councillor Kouros, is it?
7.1 and 7.4. I've already given my conflict in writing, Lord Mayor.
So could I ask Councillor to declare it's because of property or business ownership, is it?
General conflict of 7.1 as family businesses are next to the assets that are within the policy, and item 7.4 because I have property in that area. General conflict.
I would also comment. I have property in a historic area but I would therefore, I suppose.
Do I need to say that it being a general conflict, it affects the vast range of ratepayers, and therefore, as my duties as a councillor, I will stay. And
I think we're one of a class.
Yes.
So we'll move. Can we have 7 point? Well, we can actually move them all together because it's been declared.
Lord Mayor, I'd like to ask that recommendation 3 is treated separately. I've spoken to the administration about an amendment.
So may we move 7.1, 7.2 and 7.4 together? Councillor Siebentreut.
Lord Mayor, just as I did at the committee meeting, wanted to declare a general conflict of interest as well in relation to 7.4 in owning property in the area.
Okay. So we can still move 7.1, 7.2 and 7.4? Moved by Councillor.
No, I think I probably need to declare a general conflict of interest as well, having a for 7.4
because we live in heritage buildings, don't we?
Yes.
So Councillor Giles as well. So let's see if we can move 7.1, 7.2 and 7.4, moved by Councillor Noon, seconded by Councillor Snape. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried on block. Now we'll move back to 7.3. Councillor Martin.
Yes, Lord Mayor, the administration has a proposed amendment. It's a minor amendment which was discussed at committee. As an aside, while members are reading this, I often reflect on how the intention of reforming our planning legislation was to simplify it, and now I think it's actually longer and more complex than that which it replaced. But anyway, The community, in speaking to the amendment, the community's been concerned, as we've heard many times, about catalyst sites and in particular about height, particularly in terms of adjacency to residential areas. This motion captures that. But additionally, my ratepayers have more to say about appeal rights. This motion from the administration certainly echoes the findings of the expert panel and the SCAP, together with the state government, that is, arguing that developments which exceed the maximum height should be part of some appeal process. But more generally, those bodies, that is the expert panel, the SCAP and the state government, have all agreed that more generally appeal rights need to be considered. That is only considered, and that's all this motion does. It authorises the administration to have that conversation about that potential reform and the basis for that reform. And I ask members to consider that. It is exactly what our residents are thinking at this time. It satisfies them. It enables the administration to have the conversation.
Seconder.
Just to very briefly acknowledge and thank Councillor Martin for his advocacy on this, and also that of community members, some of which are in the gallery tonight. So I think this is a step forward in the right direction. It's important, and I encourage all my fellow councillors to support this brief amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Kouros.
I have a question, Lord Mayor, and I'm guided by you. Can this be tabled at the Capital City Committee as a discussion, or is that not something that... Would the mover be happy to include that in the, or is that not something that he would want to do?
Well, no, Lord Mayor, this is actually asking the administration to take a discussion forward with government and with SCAP, not for a discussion between the Premier and you and others in the room.
Okay.
So I think that this response goes to SCAP because they're in charge of it, then it gets approved by the Minister. Sometimes he's not always there, and the Premier doesn't usually get into this detail, to be honest. So unless there's a contrary view, all those in favour? All those against? I'll do that again, please. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. Thank you, members. We'll move on now to 16. This was just noting the recommendations of the Reconciliation Committee, moved by Councillor Giles, seconded by Councillor Elliott. Any debate on that? Just moving.
And I apologise for not giving notice of this. I noticed some extensive media commentary from the Joint Chair of our Reconciliation Committee about the government's Live Golf proposal, and I wondered, has this been discussed by the Reconciliation Committee?
I told them that we were looking at an MOU and a lease, but Lynette Crocker is not the Deputy Chair. She is not even a member of the committee. She's a deputy or a proxy.
Okay.
And she's a Ghana elder, as you know, and she had a very strong view about this.
And has that been discussed? That was my question.
The consultation hasn't taken place with the Ghana Yurta, and they will have an opportunity. We shared the information with the designers about where there were sensitive areas, but clearly there has to be a consultation with Aboriginal people, and that hasn't yet occurred.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you, members. 18 item, the ALGA motion, 17.2, and this is us considering, as printed, noting an opportunity to contribute to the debate, approves the following motions. Moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Noon. Would you like to speak to it?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll provide some brief rationale for why these two motions have been put forward for Council's endorsement. And it's because local governments across Australia have to pick up the vast majority of responsibility for implementing their transport networks outside of public transport, that being their local road network. So having that responsibility means that local governments are incumbent on taking the responsibility for being leaders in that space as well for active transport. So these two motions together, or recommendations for motions together, seek to provide an overarching national approach for support by the federal government and from the Australian Local Government Association to develop active transport strategies and evaluation tools of existing strategies. So this is an important step towards establishing an approach that at least affords a baseline level of consistency in active transport planning across local government areas, either within a state or across the country. And so the fact that some councils don't have active transport strategies and some don't even have transport strategies, Lord Mayor, creates inequities in opportunities for funding from their respective state governments and from the federal government. So effectively, no plan, no funding. So it's clear that some councils need some support to develop those plans and to access the funding, including the newly established National Active Transport Fund, which became active in July last year, only amounting to $100 million, but already we're starting to see some local government areas in South Australia benefit from that. Charles Sturt being one of the most recent to be announced, as recent as today, actually. The 30 by 30, which is the second motion, 2.2, relates to the fact that in the 1970s, 7 in 10 children, so 70% of children in South Australia walked or cycled to school, and that figure is closer to 1 in 10 now. And there is research from South Australia which reinforces a majority desire from children. It would be helpful if my members to my right weren't sighing through my speech, unless it depresses them so to hear about children's independent mobility. The majority of children wish to be able to walk or cycle to school independently. So 30 by 30 is effectively 30% of journeys to school by 2030, which is entirely achievable. If we look at some local examples, we have schools in the city of Unley like St Thomas and Unley Primary School, which already have more than 20% of their students walking or cycling. Glenunga International High School and the Botanic High School are also not far behind. So again, entirely achievable if there is a framework to support these aims. So in asking the federal government to help councils to progress these aims, it will be a key enabler to reducing congestion, improving road safety, reducing emissions and improving children's wellbeing, and I endorse the motions.
Contrary view, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you, members. The next is councillors' reports. Do we have any? No? Councillor Davis.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say that I was very pleased to represent you at the Mela Festival, for the Indian Mela Festival. That was really, really good, held in Victoria Square. I've also been working with Sarah Game from the Upper House to introduce a bill into the State Parliament to curtail the powers of mayors around the state and their use of Section 75G, so that it's in a way that is accountable, because there is a growing fear that mayors are using that provision to drive an outcome that they wish with no accountability behind it, all under the guise of health and safety. And thirdly, I'd like to foreshadow that I would like to call a special meeting to deal with the outcome of the court case, namely that the council, if the court finds that the central ward candidates are vacated and there's a new election held, that we adopt the caretaker policy that is our adopted caretaker policy. Also suspend the appointment of the Deputy Lord Mayor and Councillor Noon as committee chair until after the election has been determined, under the guise that it provides them with an unfair advantage to their counterparts potentially contesting the election. I would like to request legal advice on whether the council can seek reimbursement of fees by Councillor Lee paid to him over this term of office. And lastly, whether the council should be making submissions to the court on the nature of the way the council elections work, given the quota system is different than a first past the post, and that in those circumstances it would be unfair to vacate a single chair, and that the central ward in its entirety should be vacated. There are also serious concerns about the election of this council in its entirety.
I think we're moving into a major speech rather than a report from your activities.
A report on what I'm going to do.
I know, but that's a future prediction, not a report of what you've been doing. That's
right. I'm finished there, and
thank you.
But I do note the absolute gravity of the court case.
I would refer to you Section 76(1) of the Local Government Act. You might find it salutary. Can we move that note the councillors' reports, moved by Councillor Corus and seconded by Councillor Snape? All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. Thank you, members. Now we'll go on to 20. 20.1. Yes. I'm sorry? So you have... Oh, sorry. Thank you. Councillor Davis, you have a motion on notice. Do you have a seconder?
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Ho has seconded.
Yeah, I think there's a large amount of concern regarding the use of these cameras, and I, for one, am not fully educated and briefed on how they're being used, and I think that this report will assist the council to understand how these cameras are being implemented so that we can provide that information to the community. I have received a complaint, or a number of complaints from residents around being issued with expiation notices, particularly one complaint where they state that they were stopped for a very brief time to check the sign, and that they were issued with a fine just to, they were unaware of what the actual sign could say, and I understand it's difficult. So rather than push forward any of those individual instances, I'd like a report from the council as to how they're being used and how these cameras are operated within the City of Adelaide.
Yes, Lord Mayor, just a few questions first. Firstly, I'd like to know whether or not administration actually provide elected body any briefing before we actually put this mobile camera on the street. Because I have been away for 2 months, and can't remember.
Can I draw your attention to the report 593? There were briefings in March 21, July 22, August 23, and October 24.
Right, but Lord Mayor, my question here is really before we put this kind of before we put these mobile cameras on the street, I don't believe that the elected body have been properly educated about how we operate, because in terms of how we actually provide the fines to the people who park on the spot. Because really, while I was on holiday in North Pole, that I received numerous of complaints from my ratepayers that when they see these mobile cameras going around, they actually have the fears that because sometimes when they park their car on the street, they have to go to the parking machine to buy their ticket, and during the gap, if they get caught by this mobile camera, whether or not they still will be fine. And besides that, when they get caught on the camera, because generally speaking, when we have got the parking inspectors, they're going to put an expiration notice on your windscreen. Therefore, you got to pay, all right? And nowadays, how are we going to handle this? If we send a letter or post the expiration notice to their postal address, what if the postal address got changed? They're going to be fined on top of it. Right, so I really like to understand that whether or not firstly the elected bodies has been properly informed about this mobile camera, and on the other hand, whether or not the community have been properly educated how this machine operates. Thank you.
Councillor, I wasn't on council in the last term, but it was discussed extensively in the last term. Councillor Davis wasn't here at that stage, but I seem to recall meetings and budgets and very regular
Lord Mayor,
briefings on this.
just a clarification. I'm not saying that I don't know this machine going to be used. All right. I don't believe I have been provided the details how it actually operates.
I think the report is quite helpful. Councillor Martin.
Look, Lord Mayor, I think I can help my colleague. And I should say at the outset, I won't be supporting this. I don't think we need a briefing because we've had many briefings before, and indeed, as the documents show, the administration has discussed this regularly with elected members. First on e-news about 3.5 years ago. Councillor Ho was probably on holidays. And in March 2021...
I mean, I'd like to raise a point of order.
Thank you. I've made the point already, Councillor.
I mean, these disparaging remarks are constant, same from the Deputy Lord Mayor.
You don't have to make a point of order. I've just told him I think it's gratuitous.
Well, eject him from the chamber. That's what you do to me.
I think he will probably withdraw the gratuitous comment.
Of course.
Thank you.
Happy to withdraw in this instance, Lord Mayor. In March 2021, so 3.5 years ago we had the e-news. Then in March 2021 we were advised about how the technology worked, and I remember that. I was there. I wasn't away. I was in the meeting. I saw it, and I remember especially that it was called Park Safe, or it was proposed it would be, because the idea was that it would be safer for our staff to have this operation of a camera on a car, particularly in dangerous zones like bus zones, where there are buses whizzing by, having to get out of their vehicles, put a sticker on a car, and run the risk of being collected by a bus. So that made sense. Then it was launched in 2022, and I do remember that, Lord Mayor, you might do too. Channel 7 ran a story, and it was called High-Tech Sticker Lickers. And the story featured the former Lord Mayor, Sandy Verschaw, and she told everyone how great the technology was. In fact, she said that it would help to find rubbish on the sides of the road, furniture that had been abandoned, or even homeless people. So it had, according to the former Lord Mayor, a social dimension. So, Lord Mayor, the previous Lord Mayor did a great job selling that. And then we had further briefings in 23 and 24. Now, I think what's happening here is that some of the elected members are only now becoming aware of what was unfolding about 3.5 years ago. And in fact, I think most people know about these cameras. I often have people pointing out the car, which has the City of Adelaide on the side and the big canopy on the top with the cameras poking out the side. They're quite a fixture on the streets of Adelaide. Lord Mayor, we don't need a briefing. We just need people to ask the questions of our administration, who no doubt would direct them to the website where the details of this matter have been published for some years.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And Councillor Martin touched on the vast majority of what I was going to say, so I won't belabour my own points too much, other than to say that I actually do commend the former Lord Mayor Sandy Verschaw and the former council for this initiative. It's one that makes, as Councillor Martin has said, a day of life much safer for our own staff members, while providing community benefit. I did miss out on the first briefing because it was prior to the by-election in 2021, but I was there for the subsequent briefings and e-newses. So I do feel, despite missing the first one, I do feel up to date on this particular matter. I also note as well that when the new council was sworn in, there was offers from administration to go on a little ride around on the car as well. One which I unfortunately did not take them up on, although perhaps I should change my mind on that and go for a little ride and see what all the excitement is about. I know you yourself did so. So this is something that's been around for quite some time now. I do once again commend the previous council and the previous Lord Mayor for this initiative, and keeping our staff safe, that's important.
Councillor Kouros.
I never thought I'd hear the day that this council actually commends the previous council, but here we are. Lord Mayor, this is a call of action from a councillor who has received many calls from the ratepayers in trying to understand what this car does. We, in our own little bubble, might completely understand. We might have even gone for a ride. We might even have looked at the reports in detail. We might even look at our e-news, which our public don't have that right to do, reviewing our e-news and information. However, if this is some information that our ratepayers would like to have, or the members of the public would like to further understand, it's just a report, it's just a briefing, it's just questions that can be asked, questions that the public might want to know. It's similar to you bringing in Councillor Martin bringing in the parking review again for North Adelaide. It's something that people have a keen interest on, and that is our job as elected members. We respond to the public. That's what our job is to do. We're not administration. We are elected members, and we are elected by the public. And if that is what our public is asking for us to do, then why not?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just an observation around the structure of point 2, and then I'm going to ask whether the mover is willing to take an amendment here. So my understanding is our committees do not conduct public briefings, but they are able to present a report, and that is in a public setting. So I'm wondering whether we could amend this to say request that administration provide a report at the next appropriate committee meeting, and of course those reports are presented to the public.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yes.
Okay, I just think that the language here could be amended. Okay.
Happy to accept.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Are you going to, we're speaking to the amendment, which is the red part in part 2. Sorry? To the extent possible. Sorry, I'm confused. They are, yes, they are superfluous, so we might cross off to the extent possible.
The intention was a public report where there's confidential matters contained within that. The idea would be that it's a confidential report. So if I wanted to allow for the administration, if there were confidential matters in there regarding the practices or whatever might be a confidential element, that they could hive that off. So that's why, to the extent possible, that it was presented to the public was in there.
My understanding is they're quite capable of doing that without instruction.
Through the presiding member, we're clear about the scope and scale of the request for a report. We'll give it our best shot. I'm sure if we don't get it right, we'll get that feedback.
I wonder whether the mover would agree to a slight variation to include asks the administration to provide a link to the ParkSafe website so that elected members may refer voters to the site.
Because it's quite a simple element, just give them the link. Yes. We'll have an undertaking just to make it simple. Now, Councillor Noon, did you want to speak? I think we might put this to the vote. This is the amendment. Sorry? It was moved as an amendment, I'm sorry. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. Now, Councillor Martin, were you being recalcitrant? All those in favour?
Sorry, Lord Mayor.
All those in favour?
Of what, sorry? Of the substantive motion?
The amendment. All those in favour. Take it again because people weren't voting. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. Now we've got the motion. So would you like to sum up with your motion, Councillor?
Yeah, thank you.
Davis?
I thank Councillor Martin for going through the detailed history. That's history, right? So there were briefings presented, one news article, sure. What I'm asking for is how these cameras are being used now. So there's been a huge increase in the number of expiations that were our revenue that we're collecting, from about 6.3 to about 10.3 million budgeted for this year. A lot of the complaints that I've had are around how this camera is being used. So I'm asking for a report on how so the public understands what the guidelines are around this, and it's good for us to understand how artificial intelligence is being used to process it and that complaint handling process. Look, with any new technology, if we want the community to accept it, we just need to be open and honest about it. I see no reason why the council would hide this information from the public, particularly the information I'm requesting around how it's being used now, the methods of its use, so that everyone can be on the same page and we as councillors can understand what's going on in our city. All well and good to watch a Channel 7 news article from years and years and years ago, and like Councillor Martin said, I'm a new councillor, so this all happened before my time, so it would be good for me to understand how that is. But what I'm really concerned about is how the camera is currently operating, its current system, how the complaints are being handled, whether there are any key themes, because I'm of the view where there's smoke, there's fire. So I hope that you don't discount the fact that there was an article 5 years ago, the current complaints from our residents. So I hope you support the motion. It's a simple report that would help inform our community and us.
So I will just take the opportunity of, I know that I won't get a vote on this one because there's no equivalence of numbers here, but I should draw people's attention to paragraph 26 about the expiations withdrawn in the last year, and point out that we haven't had a dramatic increase in expiations. We've just gone back to the pre-COVID number. So I'll put that to the vote now. All those in favour? And against? That's carried.
Members, a division has been called in relation to the motion on notice before you for 20.1. Please stand until your name has been called in favour of the motion. Councillor Noon, Councillor Ho, Councillor Couros, Councillor Giles, Councillor Davis and Councillor Siebentrip. Thank you.
Councillor Giles.
Okay, sorry. I rise to move this motion.
Actually, could I take Councillor Ho to second this, because Councillor Ho's been
yes,
trying
that's
to do
why
this.
I was just about to say that.
He's been trying to do this for about a year and he's been prevented, so I do feel slightly guilty about this.
Just in explanation, I actually was, when Councillor Ho raised it earlier, I was very keen on us doing something about this, but I think he wisely decided to not move this motion because the Brisbane and Queensland trial was a trial for 6 months and we were waiting for the outcome of the trial. So I have discussed this with Councillor Ho and we're doing this. He's seconding and I'm moving. Look, this motion is about trying to change the conversation about how we do things. And I think that Queensland's shown us a really exciting opportunity to take a completely different policy position than normally about public transport in order to change behaviour, about the way that people operate in their space. This trial in Queensland has been incredibly successful, and the previous government committed to a 6-month trial and then made a commitment to continue it, and the current government in Queensland supported the trial and also then post the election has also committed to continuing this for at least 4 years and budgeted for it. So it's a really successful trial because it did a few things. It significantly increased the use of public transport. And that's significantly. Light rail went up 27.5%, rail 18.6%, ferries 42.8%, and the buses 15.8% of usage. It had there were more leisure trips and more weekend trips and more discretionary travel. And I think that's really interesting when you're looking at us as a capital city, because when people catch a bus and they're likely to go into the city to do something if it's very cheap, and on the weekend. The significant, initially it was put in place because of a cost of living, because it was a cost of living initiative, and that has been incredibly successful. There's something like $181 million of saving to people who catch their public transport in just 6 months. Because when you're looking at public transport, it's not just the fares, it's also the cost of parking, it's the cost of a whole lot of stuff on your wear and tear of the car and the use of the car. So it's also, business has been really positive in Queensland about it because it actually has enabled them to access a new workforce and a new set of customers who more readily and easily move around Queensland and particularly around Brisbane. And it's also what they've discovered, because people are using more, they're using public transport more for leisure trips and weekend trips. It's had a really positive impact on tourism. Sorry, could you just have a minute? So I think that the briefing made a few comments about some initiatives that state governments had in terms of either reducing or making transport free in South Australia. I think, but one of the, particularly the relation to the seniors card, which is a free transport, and I hope someone's doing a study on that because it would be really interesting to show the impact of that. But the other one is that the workers of the Royal Adelaide Hospital for years and years have been complaining about not enough parking for their shift work that they have, and the initiative of introducing free transport for people who work at the RA has been incredibly successful of dealing with issues of parking at the hospital. I think it's time to change the conversation. I think it's time to get our state government thinking about these sort of strategies. I think would be really good, particularly for a capital city, because it will enable people to quickly and easily get into the city to do things, and also to come to work in the city and not worry about the expense of doing so every day. So I'd like to move this motion, which actually just calls on us to start that conversation, and to take it to the state government and propose that we start thinking about these sort of solutions here in the City of Adelaide.
Seconding.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity. And firstly, I'd like to thank Councillor Giles for moving this motion. I'd also like to thank her for the way how she actually moved the motion. She called me a couple of weeks ago and asked me whether or not I would be still interested in moving this motion. Based on all the hard work she has done at the background, I said, you should be the one, be the pioneer of the move. So really, and besides that, Lord Mayor, I have also contacted a long-standing council member from the City of Brisbane, Stephen Huang, to try to get more details about how they actually achieve such success and try to bring it back to the council and provide it to our administration in terms of how we actually put us in a better position to negotiate with the state government. Really, at the end of the day, it's not our decision, it's the state government's decision. Thank you, Lord.
Thank you. So I'm moving around Councillor Elliott, Councillor Snape, Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Obviously, this falls into my wheelhouse broadly of transport advocacy. I don't want to throw a fly in the ointment because I want to indicate that I do actually support this, but I'm going to bring some characteristic scepticism. I think the biggest issue that we do face is the complexity of our fares, especially at the weekends, which is one of the times in which we see much lower rates of use of public transport into the city. And that's because we have peak fares and off-peak fares used at different times on Saturdays and Sundays, and no one's really quite sure how much they're paying until they tap on to a service. My scepticism lies in the fact that only about 20% of the operating budget of the Adelaide Metro system is actually covered by fares, which means that it's quite a large gap to try and make back up. The Queensland state budget is quite different to the South Australian state budget, and I'll point out that we have a vast array of very large road projects being undertaken in South Australia, but very few public or active transport projects. So I can see where the money's going that would otherwise suck this up. But I think there is a really important and mature conversation that needs to be had here about restructuring fees and simplifying them. What I think we should be taking as our role here is to lead that discussion, to try and get other councils behind us on this discussion, to push the fare reform. And I want to point to an example from a state that I used to live in about a decade ago in Western Australia, which in the last couple of years has been running a campaign on and off board their services for using public transport recreationally. And a lot of that has been a really positive campaign that pointed out the places that you can visit across the metropolitan area using public transport. And rather than making it free or making it 50% fares, they went from 9 zones to 2 zones, which means that you could move from the furthest extent, 60 kilometres down in Mandurah up into the centre of Perth for about, I think it's about $9, where it was going to cost you about $20 before. So it's quite a big difference. The figure's probably slightly out because I tap my card and I just get on the train because I'm just pleased to be on a train. But they simplified their fare structure. We don't have zones in South Australia and Adelaide, which means that we probably really need to be looking at where those peak fares are applying and then look at the other cases in which there should be a more equitable fare structure. So absolutely on board with the idea of 50-cent fares as a concept. I think there are some real barriers in South Australia for us being able to financially achieve that, or the state government being able to afford that. But I don't think that there's any reason why this council, as a capital city, shouldn't be behind that and backing it 100%.
Look, I'm certainly supportive of this, and I commend Councillor Giles and Councillor Ho for pushing this. I think this would have been a really taking up Councillor Elliott's point that this being a state issue, this would have been a really good motion to put forward for the LGA ordinary meeting coming up. I think we've missed our timelines though. Saying that, I'm actually quite interested in the administration's report on 5.1 and 5.2 that will undertake further investigations into the success of the fare reduction initiated by the Queensland Government, because it'd be really interesting to see if it reduced the traffic coming into the city of Brisbane. I know it increased numbers, but what the financial impact of that was on the state government, that would be really interesting to know, and all those benefits that were associated with that. I think it's a really interesting time to put this forward. The state government might be very keen on it, seeing there's an election looming over the next year, and I think that's how Queensland aligned this with their election. So I think this would be a popular thing to put out there. I would like to see this actually tabled at the Capital City Committee. I'm not sure if we could. We're getting a big agenda for that committee, but it would be a good one to put on the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Smith, and then Councillor Davis. And I think we might put it to...
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Giles and Councillor Ho, for your advocacy in this area. I'm very, very supportive. I just want to rewind slightly and to the origin of what happened in Brisbane. And what we actually saw was the Queensland Greens advocate for free public transport, and then Labor, in a move to protect their inner city seats, then moved a policy.
Sorry, I have a point of order. It's about
government.
I have a point of order.
This directly connects to
it's point of order. It's not.
Can you just sit down, Councillor Snape?
We're not here to tout the benefits of Greens policy in Queensland. We're talking about making a recommendation to this state government on a 50-cent.
Councillor, you've been talking about the One Nation policy, so I think that we should...
In my council reports, in my office,
yes.
I'm a councillor, and so I'm advocating for
I
local
reject your
reform.
point of order. Councillor Snape.
Thank you. And there is a point to this. It's not just about making political points for a party in a different state. But the point I'm getting to is that this was pushed by the Greens. It was then picked up in a form, the 50 cents, by the Labor state government in the lead up to their election, and then matched by the Liberal opposition. So what I'm saying is pressure from other areas outside of the two-party dichotomy works, be it from minor parties, be it from councils, etc. That's why I see benefit in this, because coming in from a different angle, I believe can provide additional level of pressure or insight to something that perhaps, for all we know, the state government's already considering. We don't know. So therefore, I do commend this motion. I welcome once again Councillor Giles and Councillor Ho for their advocacy, and hopefully we can see some progress in this in our state, because as Councillor Elliott has noted, it's something that's happening across the country. Other states are finding ways to try and activate their public transport, which can only be a benefit.
Thank you. So we're moving around the room inexorably. Councillor Davis, then Councillor Couros.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to do a history lesson, which is what we're all seeming to do, the reason why Brisbane needed this policy was because it was the 10th most congested city in the world. You would spend every year 84 hours of travel in your car in Brisbane. So they completely failed to accommodate people getting into the city. Now, that's basically 2 full weeks stuck in your car driving into and out of work, a complete nightmare. And Brisbane had the country's least accessible public transport system. Adelaide has 30 hours lost by car, which is quite good in comparison. Now, given the way that this council is going in terms of its policy settings, it could well take South Australians 84 hours to get into the city based on what we're planning to do. So I think this is a good anticipatory...
Point of order, Lord Mayor. The inference is that we are doing something to frustrate motor vehicle travel in the city. I know of no measure approved by this council to frustrate motor vehicles.
So I do think that this is a good anticipatory measure given the City of Adelaide's war on cars. I don't work for the state government.
Point of order.
Councillor, come along, please.
No, I don't work for the state government. I don't have skin in the game, but I also don't think that the government can afford $1.4 billion over the next 4 years to pay for this initiative. But it certainly makes sense. The way that it doesn't make sense commercially to catch public transport into the city. If you have a couple, it'll cost you $5 each to get into the city. It costs you $10 for a trip in, a total of $20. You're better off driving and parking. So public transport needs to be more competitive with the parking fees at the moment. So I support the motion and think it's a good measure to abate Adelaide City Council's war on cars.
I think you need to stop talking about this because it's fabrication. Councillor Kouros.
Lord Mayor.
Stop it, please. Councillor Kouros will be here all night.
Lord Mayor, I won't take up much time, but I commend Councillor Giles and Councillor Ho for their full intent. However, I'd rather a more strategic approach in regards to ensuring that we can benefit from an affordable option for people to come into the city through public transport. Sorry? Was that Councillor Elliott?
I'll speak to Councillor.
He coughed. Oh, okay. I think there was Tom Constantinos was on radio making it very clear in response to Robert Sims' call on for free public transport during the Fringe, that he stated that he has big plans for our transport system and it doesn't involve it being free. Along those lines. But I would rather a motion that it works, maybe something going to the Capital City Committee, having a discussion on the table, talking about the zones as Councillor Elliott has. Maybe that could be a better option. But to go and write a letter to say that 50-cent fares, I don't think that's allowing us to have a broader conversation about the benefits of having reduced costs for people taking public transport.
Thank you. Councillor Giles, would you like to sum up?
Thank you to all councillors for your input into this question. I just want to make it clear that our intention is to commence and implement discussion with the state government, put on the table to show us some leadership. And so to address Councillor Kouros's issues, I think I wouldn't imagine that the Lord Mayor would write saying we want the same scheme as Queensland, because that is not going to meet the local needs, and we need to be aware of that. I just also want to point out that this trial in Queensland was actually documented and supported in research by Queensland University, and there's a report out about the impact. So it was done as a proper trial. And the issue of traffic congestion was documented in that as well. I was really disappointed that Councillor Davis used this as an opportunity to imply that that it was required because around cars.
A point of order.
Can we hear the point of order?
You've previously heard points of order and maintained them, that we wouldn't make disparaging remarks about individual councillors, and yet you've allowed Councillor Giles to do that. I asked you to take back her statement about me and speak to the topic and not about me, even though I am very, very interesting.
statement. I understand she's disappointed.
I'm disappointed.
I spend much of my life being disappointed. I have sympathy with her.
I'm disappointed about the framing of the response from Councillor Davis, because my whole point is, in moving this motion, is to try and change this conversation. If we have the same conversation over and over about this without thinking a bit outside the square, then we're going to have the same problems and the same arguments. So my intention in moving this is to show some leadership and to request that the state government show some leadership too, in really seriously thinking about how we can deal with the question of congestion, how can we deal with the question of the cost of living impact on fares, and how can we actually use our public transport systems to actually benefit the state, benefit business, and benefit individual people, and also benefit the environment all at the same time. I really commend Queensland for being brave enough to try this, and I think that they're in some ways leading the world, and I think we should be second.
Thank you. I sense an element of confusion in the mind of Councillor Kouros, and whilst I don't try to interpret her views, I think she's worried about how I'm going to approach state government. Is that?
There's no action on it. There's no...
Yes, I think that I will interpret that in my own unique way.
Yes. and it states more about Brisbane, so that means if you're going
to I will take up the cudgel and I will approach the state government, beginning first with the Minister of Transport. Don't worry, I will act.
I have full confidence the Lord Mayor will know exactly what to do.
Those in favour? All those against? That's carried. Thank you, members. I can see the end in sight. Do we have any motions without... Division's been called.
Members, a division has been called in relation to motion 20.2. Please stand in favour of the motion until your name has been called. Councillor Noon, Deputy Lord Mayor, Councillor Elliott, Councillor Ho, Councillor Giles, Councillor Siebentripp, Councillor Snape and Councillor Martin.
Thank you, members. That was passed and carried. We'll move on to the next item, which is the motion... oh, we've done that, so I apologise. Motions without notice. Any motions without notice? Not, we'll move on briskly. Questions on notice. And we have the Walker one, which we will note, 22.1, and then we'll move on briskly. 23, which is questions without notice. None. We'll move on sharply again at a brisk rate. Can I ask someone to move the confidentiality clause? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Siebentritt. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimous. Thank you, members. We'll now move on to the item substantive when they get out the door.